Huh. Interesting guy, that is. Hey, welcome! Feel free to join us in my den. Here we do all sorts of activities, such as playing shitty games, playing forgotten games, and sometimes we do play some good ones. Before you get in though, let me ask you something. Did you know it's Halloween? Yeah, this year went by quickly, I know, but I did notice you're not wearing any costumes. You know, looking like that is scary, but I wouldn't count as any type of costume. Also, this isn't any place that you can simply walk in anytime you want. You might get eaten alive by the other guys if they don't respect you, and that's something you gotta earn. Oh, me? Oh yeah, don't worry about me. I earned my place. Let me tell you a story. A story about what game I played this week. I wasn't sure what to play for Halloween. I'm already making a playthrough of The Evil Within on my second channel. We'll start playing Alan Wake 2 and might do Metal Gear 2. But then what's left for me to play here? I thought about the sequel of The Suffering, but that didn't turn well as the game kinda sucked. So I thought I could play Carmageddon, but I wasn't a big fan, so then what? I once heard about this game called Gnawtymare Creatures, which a lot of people say it's the spiritual predecessor for Bloodborne. So I was interested. Could I, someone who never touched Bloodborne, be able to go through the entire so-called one of the hardest PS1 games? Only time could tell. So I picked up a copy and instantly fell in love with it. Oh, also, quick disclaimer, this video might come out in an awkward time since I saw 4 other channels I watch make videos on this same game. I promise I started playing this before any of this happened and it's too late to turn back now. Our story begins as we watch the story of Adam Crowley, a scientist that experiments with dead bodies in search of knowledge and power, who then starts messing with black magic and becomes a sorcerer. The night he plans to unleash his creatures into the streets of London in hopes of destroying it is also the night you select your playable character. There's 2 of them. You can pick between Ignatius, who is said to be a man of God, someone who traveled the world combating evil, and Nadia, or Nadia, a biologist, a fencer, and a gymnast who knew fighting. I decided to play as Nadia, or Nadia, and you'll see that most of my gameplay will be playing as her, but I'll also show you some Ignatius gameplay. Let's start with the gameplay in this one, as it is something it took me a while to get the hang of. You can press square to attack with your sword, or X to attack with your feet. Pressing them multiple times lets you combo the enemies you find. However, you'll notice that sometimes some enemies, like the zombies, come back to life whenever you down them. At first I thought this was just how the game worked, but no. If you press up and square at the same time, you will lunge at the zombie and cut them in half, and then they wouldn't come back. And then I started noticing that I did some different combos by accident, and after looking up online I found that there's actually quite a bit of depth to the gameplay. It's not what you would expect from a Souls game, but still, you have to think before you approach the enemies. See their attack patterns, block, sidestep, and etc. You can find what people call chop-up combos in the game, which if executed correctly will instantly chop a character. It can be a little bit overpowered as they can't block it, but you still gotta do it right. Otherwise you might just chop one of their hands off. And that's if you can get to them before they spam you with attacks to death. Safe to say, impatience is your biggest enemy in this game. Besides the fighting, the game is pretty linear in most levels. You can move around with tank controls, strafe with L1 and R1, jump with triangle and use your items with R2. You can find items hidden in boxes or by defeating enemies. And there's actually a lot of them, pretty useful stuff too. There are items to shoot enemies at a safe range, a gun that you can shoot while spinning to kill everyone around you, one that makes your enemies fight each other, pretty cool stuff. And every other level you get a boss fight that changes gameplay. The first boss took me a minute to understand as I did not expect to have any other interaction besides the monster itself. But after 30 minutes of being stupid, I finally got it. You have to destroy the wooden pillars around them so they'll drop and hit him. After that, you can finally fight the monster itself, and just like the rest, got to figure out his patterns and counterattack. The music in this game is actually one of my favorite parts. I'm already a sucker for sounds, but this one was definitely a treat. Besides not having a lot to it. You get mostly an ominous soundtrack for the background while you move through the levels, and it definitely sets you in the mood for when a monster jumps out of a wall to get you, which actually happens a lot in this game. It really doesn't stop trying to scare you until the last level, and it's pretty effective. Especially recently, I've noticed that a lot of horror games stop trying to be scary after a while and focus more on gameplay. But this one always keeps you on your toes, not only because you're gonna be jump scared if you're not expecting it, but you'll also die because of the amount of damage you take if you don't block. But then you get to the boss fights, and the music completely changes to this. It is awesome. The soundtrack was composed by El Mobo, who's been a composer since '89 and apparently came back to make the sequel too, so I'm hoping it's gonna be just as good. And the graphics, now, whenever I was a kid, I used to hate what people call screen crunch. Like when you get Sonic for the Genesis and crunch the whole thing to fit in the Game Boy Advance screen. I understand the reason for it, you want everything to look just as good with less pixels, but I would always pick the less good looking version of a game if it meant that I wouldn't lose half of the field of view. That being said, this game has very big characters. I mean, there's parts in this game where they basically fill the whole screen. However, this wasn't without purpose. It makes you hear that ominous soundtrack from before and then move carefully through the level, expecting anything to jump at you from behind a wall. It makes you feel claustrophobic, and that's a good thing. Whenever you get into a fight, the game changes the camera and makes the character focus on the enemy, and there's a very cool effect that happens that now I think has more to do with the camera than anything, where the backgrounds get really dark, making you feel even more claustrophobic during fights. Like you can't see what's hiding in the dark right behind you. And the monster designs, I really loved it for the most part. While there are a few that I think just look a bit goofy, some of them look terrifying and I couldn't imagine me playing this as a kid. There's zombies, werewolves, spiders, weird insects, and you then also get weird creatures like these red demons, banshees, and this weird monster that lives in the water. And spoiler alert for now, when you get to the end of the game going after Adam Crowley this whole time, he drinks his last potion, which turns him into a monster. You then have to fight him while the city burns around you. It is really sick and extremely hard. I think it took me longer than any other level to beat him. Even when I got to cheese him in the corner of the map, he wouldn't die. I did end up beating him, however, and I can safely say that after chopping his head off, something happens that definitely let us know that there will be a sequel. After beating the game, I started looking online and found that there's actually a really awesome community behind this game. There's a website called gnawtymarecreatures.net that has everything about the game, from characters to monsters, strategies, cheat codes, and even a message board that sadly doesn't seem to work anymore. But people online seem to really praise this game and still ask for either a sequel or at least a remaster, both of which apparently did happen but were cancelled. And after finishing the game, you also unlock a cheat code that lets you play as the monster, so there's your replayability. I think it's just something cool that they added last minute, as there's parts that you can't get through unless you take some damage, but it's cool nonetheless. But in the end, I can safely say I'm a fan now. This game is incredibly underrated and at the hands of Ubisoft now, so I doubt we will ever see another game from this series, but hey, one can hope, I guess. But yeah, I don't think you're gonna get in today. There's a lot you need to do before getting inside and you might find something you won't like in there. But try again next week. Did you hear that?